Hey everybody, Brett from AstartesGaming here, back with another Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord developer blog video. This is actually one of the better developer blogs we've had in a while, so I figured I would cover this one in its own right, rather than just kind of slamming it together with a few other developer blogs and just, giving it a very surface level look. Today we're talking about horses and just sort of mounts in general, and they actually go into quite a bit of depth on that, so I'm looking forward to discussing this one with you guys, but let's go ahead and dive on in. So, from the steppe empires of Central Asia to the feudal states of Europe, cavalry was an integral part of medieval armies. Whether providing logistical support or charging the enemy on the battlefield, horses proved to be invaluable assets in warfare. In this week's blog, we'll take a look at these elegant and powerful animals and discuss the improvements and changes we've made to horses in Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord. They don't really mention it here, but I mean, they're also completely integral to the game as well. It is Mount and Blade after all, and cavalry is such a huge part of this game and really what sets it apart from other games, because so many, action combat games that are, I mean, this game's sort of in a genre all of its own, but anything close to it is generally you running around on foot fighting other people, and that obviously happens in this game, but the cavalry combat in this game is like so far apart from any other game that at least I've ever played. There are a few that have tried to emulate it since, and some have been closer than others, but when the original came out, there was really nothing else like it. So yeah, I mean, horses are a huge part of this game. Anyways, in Bannerlord, horses are just as important as their real-world counterparts, and just like in real life, there are different breeds which are suited to different tasks. We have a variety of different horses in the game, most of which players of our previous games will already be familiar with. They include the charger, desert horse, the hunter, the mule, the saddle, the steppe horse, and the sumpter horse. So yeah, I mean, none of these are new. Not a one of them. What I find interesting is, I believe the charger is based on like the medieval war horse, which, given their period of influence, like the part of history they're drawing from, I don't know if those would have existed yet historically, but I mean, obviously this isn't set in a fantasy world, I mean, not fantasy, but a fictional world, so they can kind of, fudge that if they want, and that's fine. It just gives us more variety. Each type of horse has its own stats, which determine their charge damage, speed, maneuverability, hit points, and carry capacity of these horses. That's an important thing right there. So notice that they said carry capacity. That's a new stat. Everything else, charge damage, speed, maneuverability, we've had that before. Carry capacity, however, is new. So some of you might have noticed that we didn't mention armor, but we'll get to that. That's a interesting thing as well that we'll get to. On the campaign map, horses greatly improve the movement speed of your party. They also vastly increase your maximum carry load, which should be of interest to any traders or looters out there. Of course, trading and banditry being a much bigger part of Bannerlord, or at least a more viable part, because there are now deeper systems involved to let you do that, rather than, just being at odds with everybody. If you're a bandit, you can actually set up, criminal enterprises in towns now, and as a merchant or a trader, when you invest in properties, not only are they actually represented in the towns now, but they, produce goods that wouldn't otherwise be there. And if, for example, you're like a horse breeder, then horses would be a new thing that's, being produced in that town. Anyways, however, you won't be able to buy additional horses just for these benefits anymore. When upgrading your troops to a cavalry class, you will need to provide them with their own mount. And if you read last week's blog, you will have a good idea of how to get a steady supply of these. So, regarding the requirement for horses before upgrading to cavalry, this has actually been done in a few warband mods. The one I played that I remember best that did this was the 12th mod. It's just called 12th. It's set in the 12th century, and it covers a very large part of the world, basically all of Europe and Asia, the Middle East, some of Africa. But it focuses a lot on the Song dynasty in China, and that's where we were sort of running around in for the brief time that we played it. but it did require you to have horses in your inventory before you could upgrade a unit to a cavalry unit. So that's not necessarily a new idea. It's been done in mods before, but it's definitely new to the base game. And it certainly makes things more challenging because now you actually need to have that resource, and that resource can be quite expensive. So not only are cavalry going to be, more expensive troops in terms of upkeep, but you actually need to make that investment now just to get them in the first place. Right. So one of the changes that we made to horses is that they now come with an equipment slot. Oh, by the way, the reference to a good idea of how to get a steady supply of these, that's referencing the fact that you can, have like a horse breeding enterprise now. Or, you want to go to towns where they have one already if you don't have one of your own. So one of the changes we made to horses is that they now come with an equipment slot. Players can equip their horse with different types of saddlebags, harnesses, or armor, which modifies the stats of the horse. This allows players to customize their mount to better suit their current needs depending on their current activity. I really like this because it gives me a little bit of the same vibe I had with Kingdom Come Deliverance, where even though I had more money than I knew what to do with by the end of my playthrough of that game, I still hadn't upgraded my horse because I was so attached to it. You start the game without a horse, and the first horse you're given is Pebbles. And Pebbles is basically the worst horse that you can get in the game. Any horse that you buy after that point is an upgrade. Depending on the horse and the equipment you give it, the upgrades will be in different directions or potentially in all directions. But Pebbles is the first one you start with, and in my first playthrough of the game that I did on my own time, I kept Pebbles the whole way through and just bought every possible upgrade for, I assume, her. But yeah, I got attached to my horse and I upgraded my horse rather than just replacing it with a better horse. And in Warband, you couldn't really do that because the horse is an item more than like an actual creature or being. Certainly not a character, where if you want more armor on your horse, then you buy a heavier armored horse. You don't upgrade the one that you have. And not in the sense that you're keeping the same horse but improving it. You're upgrading it by replacing it. So I like this because this allows you to sort of get attached to a certain horse. It'd be great if you could name them. I don't know if they'll let you name them. Through modding you certainly could, and that's something that I've done in playthroughs where I essentially create a horse item, a duplicate of the one I own, but with an actual name rather than just like the generic name. But it'd be nice to be able to name that horse and then keep it with you the entire playthrough, and then it would mean something when your horse got injured or lame or died. So yeah, I mean it's just more immersive, and that's always a good thing. Anyways, the design process for creating both the horse models and their equipment was actually quite straightforward. Our first step was to do some extensive research on different breeds of horses and the types of equipment that would have been used historically. Then we selected what we thought would be the most appropriate references for the game and used a bit of creative freedom in cases which we couldn't find anything to represent the different cultures that each of our factions takes their inspiration from. The next step was to create some concept art to help bring our ideas to life. After creating and reworking a number of different designs, we moved on to the modeling phase. This involved creating both high and low poly versions of each model to be used in the texture baking process. Finally, we implemented them in the game, ready for testing. So most of that is irrelevant here. It's just what you do when you're making character models. But it's interesting though. Okay, so they did pull a lot of this from historical references, or at least they based it on historical references, and it looks fairly historical. This looks pretty Eastern with the round sort of chest plate in there. Although it looks a lot better in the concept art, to be honest. It's very flat here. They didn't give it enough. I think because it's probably just textured on there. If it is part of the model, it's one piece and they just sort of raised it. But I think the normal maps could have been better there because it doesn't quite stick out the way, like even the little pieces of like lamellar armor on the sides have more depth to them than this does. And maybe it's the lighting, but just little things. But I mean, even in the concept art, I like all the designs they have chose. But this is just for the Aserai as well, which of course is like the desert faction, the one that's based on the various Arab tribes. and it does look very Eastern, so it feels historical. Each of the horses come in a variety of colors, which we think helps to add to the overall immersion of the game. Yeah, I mean, obviously, not every Sumpter horse is going to be 100% identical. You know, they might be, well, they'll be similar in physique, sure, but they're not all going to have the exact same colorations. They're not going to have the same patterns. So stuff like that. Definitely more immersive to have a little bit of variety there. And plus, the nice thing is you can find, you know, a horse that you really like the look of. And again, that gives you more reason to be attached to it, because you don't want to lose this really cool looking horse that you've also, you know, completed the entire campaign with, and you've upgraded with all this cool armor. Just, again, more immersive. So, and in addition to this, we implemented a horse mark variation system, which adds some additional variety to the horses by randomly assigning them with leg and facial markings, which helps to make them look and feel more natural. It would have been nice if this was like a whole body thing, but I understand why they did head and leg, because obviously if you're covering the horse in armor, those are probably the only two things you're ever really going to see. And you probably will be covering the horse in armor, because obviously it benefits you to do so. It'll be interesting to see how the armor works in detail, because you know, potentially they could have drawbacks. It could hurt the speed, it could hurt the mobility. When you were upgrading your horses in Warband, generally, you know, the unarmored horses were faster and more maneuverable. The more armored horses were heavier, had better charge damage, but were slower, not always significantly slower. Sometimes it was very minimal, but usually had less maneuverability as well, because they're obviously heavier horses that have a bunch of equipment on them versus smaller horses with no equipment on them. So it made sense. But now we're adding this to existing horses regardless of type. So will certain equipment or certain like horse bardings be limited to certain horse types? Will it just be a complete free-for-all and you can put whatever you want on whichever horse? I mean, I would prefer that. But then how will that affect the horse's stats? Is it just going to add armor to it? I would think if you're going to put this onto a horse, it should definitely increase the charge damage, because the horse is heavier. It's going to hit you harder. But in theory, it would also slow the horse down and hurt the mobility a little bit. So is it going to impact those stats negatively as well? That'll be interesting to see. Anyways, in next week's blog, we'll pick back up where we left off with our series of interviews with members of the Tailworlds team. They're going to talk to concept artists. I like concept art, so this might be interesting, but honestly, at this point, I want like nitty-gritty details about the game, because it's been a long time since it's been in development, obviously. You guys are all well aware. And so I don't want to hear about like early development stuff, which is, you know, concept art. I want to hear about like the finalized details of the single player campaign. That's what I'm interested in. And so this stuff to me is too little too late, but sure, whatever. Right, so that might get lumped into a video with a couple of others, depending on how interesting it is. I'll read it first and decide from there. But regarding Mount and Blade on the channel in general, I wanted to kind of put this here because I know this reaches more people than some of my other videos do, especially the ones interested in this sort of stuff. Probably not going to have any Mount and Blade this week, so Clash of Kings, for example. Not going to do any this week because I'm working on something big for that series to sort of, I don't want to say wrap it up, because there's still going to be plenty more episodes, but it's going to be sort of like an end game thing that we can start working toward the end. Because Season 2 will be the final season of A Clash of Kings. And we probably got at least 10, if not maybe 20 episodes left. We'll see. I mean, I have something in mind, but I don't know how exactly it's going to play out. But I'm working on that. So that's going to take me some time to get ready. Hopefully it'll be ready in time for next week's episode. Also, we're going to be doing another Mount and Blade Warband playthrough very, very soon. I had to do a bit of modding for it to get it ready, but I believe it is ready now. So it's just a matter of me kind of getting in the game, setting up where I want our starting point to be, and going from there. And Anno Domini, that series isn't dead, although I haven't been able to post it in a long time. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go with it. we're a little bit directionless right now, and there's a bit of modding that I need, or I wanted to do for it, and I don't know if it's even worth doing. Oops. Or if it needs to be done. But yeah, I was just sort of, I felt rudderless in that series because we kind of accomplished our goal, and then it was like, where do we go from there? So we'll see, but I realize I've been playing less Warband on the channel as of late. And part of that's just because obviously the hype from Bannerlord has worn off for quite a while now. And so, you know, my attention has gone to other things. But, you know, Mount & Blade is always going to be part of the channel, so it's not going to go anywhere. And it will be coming back a little bit more than it's been, especially since, like, Kingdom ended. But that's where we're at right now. So just letting you guys know. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I had a great time talking about some Bannerlord with you, and I look forward to seeing you guys back here for whatever comes next.